This is the longest that I've put up all these surveys.
Okay.
Yeah, I normally do, but this semester it's I don't know why.
I get people say like wait for your class until the last minute in case whatever. I feel like I would.
Now for this project, did we all need to submit something?
No,
Just
one person for the group should be enough.
Did we submit the game index?
Game story.
I got an initial reply.
Yeah.
It says that no one is visiting his grandma who's in the hospital. Who else could here today? I don't necessarily think we're
I guess is that what you need?
I have.
You guys figure something out.
Mine not necessarily have.
They have a presentation.
Oh, you usually pitch this like you pitch the game to your
Okay.
to your peers. So you assign it.
Okay, we're gonna get started here in a minute. Now, today is the picnic outside, so we kind of want to get done early if we can, so that other people can have a chance to get out there and get some free stuff, because it's, you know, important to get free stuff. So I think we shouldn't have any trouble doing that, or we might take a break or something. We'll figure it out as we get going. Now, this is like we have 2 more class sessions after this one, and I had hoped to finish up that game we were working on together. I think what I'll do is get it pretty well set to video so that you guys can watch that outside of class. And then next week, we'll have a work session for you to work on your final project, because it'll be due the week after. So I was talking to Isaac about that. The judges at our state contests kept mentioning to our contestants that they should be creating a vertical slice of their game. And I think that was a really important concept. So they kept saying, think about your design, have your storyboard convey what the game is going to be, have your backstory tell people about it, but what your prototype should be, what you're presenting, is it just a vertical slice of that game. So make sure as you're working towards this final project, you limit your scope to something like that. You know, not necessarily a fully developed, multi-level, everything works kind of game, but more, yes, sir?
What's a vertical slice?
Think about it. If you were playing a game and you were going along through this level, a vertical slice would be chunk what it's like from here to here, just this little part of the game.
Oh.
So your simulation could be just that little section, or you might have more general assets than what you would have in your real game, like we've seen in some of our assets where some of your art assets aren't very fully developed, things like that.
I see.
But just think about it like that, like, you know, if you think about Mario Brothers, just a little from here to here and, you know, jumping on a brick, doing all of these things. Now, that can still be a lot of work because they're still talking about all of these concepts and things happening very quickly. But the idea is limit your scope, limit your prototype to being something that would show what it's like, not necessarily be the whole game.
Kind of like, you know, just, I guess it's like you're saying, it just shows a basic run through of what.
Get a look and feel kind of
Yeah.
for it, you know, that you're going to have these aspects and it's going to be these kind of player movements and stuff like that so that you can get a look and feel. But I do think you guys have accomplished a huge amount. We're here just once a week. And I know being a hybrid, that means that you should be spending a lot of time outside of class. So it's hard to do that with all of the other responsibilities and things that everybody has. So you guys have done a great job. We've got, besides some games to look at, which I'm really excited about. David's been playing with some new toys up here. Do you want to tell everybody a little bit about those, or do you want to wait?
I'm fighting with this, trying to get this to work.
The
This
technical
thing's full of
aspects are
trouble.
the,
This thing's full of trouble. I'd recommend going with the Vive or the now it's Oculus Rift,
What one is that?
not the HP MR. But this is great for if you're just doing artwork and stuff like that in the virtual field, because it can go AR, VR, and MR.
What's
Which
MR?
mixed reality. It's a blend. Its proper name is MR, but it also goes by AR VR, which is a blend of augmented reality with throwing objects from the virtual world into your world.
Okay.
It's more responsive than just straight augmented reality.
makes you, I don't, someday it'll be, those hoarder houses you'll be able to put on all your glasses in your house will be.
One day soon we'll be running around playing shoot games in real life.
Yeah, that might not be good.
I'm always like doing that.
They could have a virtual reality for like
Getting on like
too.
this, some sort of like treadmill that moves in every direction.
Well, they got it already.
Well, let's start,
Yeah, look it
let's
up.
see
It's
what
like-
it's
it's
called.
like-
The Zoom session is active.
It's got
It's so sick.
it's this Omni trip, and it's got this waist thing you can wear.
Oh, it holds you in place.
Yeah, and then it's got like a thing to hold like your wires for your headset. They come straight in.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
They don't like. I don't think they're like if the. It's hard to explain because like when I looked into it, I can't see most of the price. Like it's at that stage. You know what I mean? It's I'm sure that works cool. I went ahead and built the game. So for our preview, we'll do that. So there's no editor sheet game.
Okay, cool.
Hopefully,
That's like the execution by the way.
yeah. And then I still have this open, so they're gonna all we have to do is call the game, we'll straight to Canada.
Alright.
And then some of the work, I guess, I'll go over.
Check your grades.
If we were, we'll do is we'll set the laptop.
Didn't come across, you see it in there.
We'll let you do
So I can
that.
Yeah,
check your grades.
I can do the buttons. I'll be like, holy.
That was my favorite game in like 7th grade.
I don't.
Okay, Zoom.
I was a mini clip like a lot of just like
I
every
still don't know 30 minutes.
That's when Club P1 like became that. You know, when you ever played Club P1.
Number one, down button to go over a time.
Do you guys know you can
Hit the left button, roll over it, down button again.
Hey, what's
Oh,
that?
yeah. You can kind of cheat it if you press it really fast. You can just flip over to the.
That's what I was saying. You just
Yeah,
gotta
you
do
can
it.
go over level 3 or something like that.
Yeah, you can go over the blank area.
Okay, I'm
Yeah,
just sorry.
down, left arrow.
Sign,
Oh,
join a
you're fine.
meeting.
Do we need to,
Down.
do we maybe not need to?
Join a meeting.
But this
And
one
I
down
think,
button.
is that one?
Yeah, if you do that, yeah.
Yep.
No way.
Yep, join.
I just think it's funny.
And I will pull out the, do you want the story as well? I can pull up the
Sure,
story.
if you want to tell everybody,
Yeah.
I think it makes it make more sense, don't you?
Oh, really? Well, you have to increase your
Yeah.
force.
Yeah,
No, in his script, how much like
yeah,
force he applies to move it.
yeah, that would be changed. I didn't see that.
The only other thing I can think of is I don't know if there was like a way to make it 8. Like if you can go over here and like
Oh,
tell the things
okay,
that
continue.
these things are some kind of like anchor objects.
Okay, now
So that way it's built in.
minimize that. I will get,
Because like
now,
technically,
I'm trying to, okay, now I remember.
And it has only a couple.
Took me a
But
second.
it's when it's like it's in a corner right now.
And, yep, and there we go.
Yeah.
On the Zoom session?
Yeah.
Go to share
that's what I was trying to
and
do.
share your screen.
Oh, sure.
I got it. I got
Share.
It's weird.
Oh, wait. It might be there.
The camera
Do I click?
No. It just went through.
The first movement of mine, literally, if you did this, it kept going up each move. Oh, yeah.
Stuff for their every
Click that one. Click that one. Oh, okay. There we go.
Not this iteration, but
Share.
eventually there's an Astro that
You share.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's a big one.
Screen. There we go.
And then it should, okay, so now it's showing. Is up here. Yep, we can
Okay.
see your screen up there on the big screen.
Okay.
You should be able to see them. It's screen up here, or if you want to join the Zoom session, you'll be able to see it on yours. So either way.
Okay. Hello, everyone.
Let everybody get kind of joined in.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alex Peterson, and I am here to introduce you to my newest prototype. And it is basically it's kind of a space shooter game, but it's with I'm using like a space cannon, and it takes place on Earth. And basically, the story is one day in the year 2030 AD, there is a secret and secluded U.S. military base that was getting ready for training as usual. But then they found out all of a sudden there was unusual looking spy planes that they have never seen before. The sergeant of the military had told one of the gunners of the military base, Thomas Price, to take out the unknown extraterrestrials. That spy planes are unknown. The spy planes that were from an unknown origin. And then basically he went outside of the base, and basically he went out to take out the spy planes. And if it's all up to you if you will save the world, or it will get destroyed because you weren't able to save it. So there you go. That's the simple story right there. All right. Now on to the actual game. Okay. But anyways, the game itself, I have a startup menu right here. And I have basically a quit button that allows you to exit, and then a play button, which enters the game. And here, we use the space bar to shoot down the enemy ships. Yep.
Does it shoot as fast as you push the button?
Yeah. It happens every time you push it down. So. It only works if you push it. But yeah, that's basically, let me show you the code. The code itself, there's a bounds check, which basically makes sure that it basically just makes sure that the enemies and the ship itself that you play as, they don't leave the bounds of the screen. So that script is right here. Basically, this sets some variables in the inspector with your radius, and you set the keep on screen to true at first, and dynamically you would set the is on screen variable, which allows your ship to be on the screen to true. Your camera width, your height, and basically these booleans just tell if your character's to the right, if it's off of the right, off of the left, off, up or down. And basically camera height is talking about the orthographic stuff and for the orthographic size of the camera. Yeah. And basically this checks for your horizontal and vertical positions. And this one has the restrictions for how far left and right and up and down you can go. And let's see, I have a lot of scripts. For the enemies, they basically allow the enemies to go in the y-axis. They're going downward. And essentially, I set their speed to 10. Their fire, I was eventually going to go into fire rate, and where it would be 0.3. And yeah, their health is there. But essentially, you set a property here, a get and set for your position, and your position variable. And then basically here, what's supposed to happen here is that your enemy will be destroyed on the screen once it reaches the end of the bottom of the screen. And this here is what tracks the collision of the enemy ship, where basically it checks for another game object, and that game object would be the projectile hero, is what the tag is, so it would be the projectile. And basically if something else hits it and it's not that, then it'll say enemy was hit by a non-projectile. So and then for the hero,
The question is, your enemy, are you just dropping it, or is it actually moving at a certain speed? Is it spawning and falling, or are you actually moving it down?
I believe I'm moving it down in the Y direction. I think that's what's happening. Yeah. And basically here sets the speed of my ship. This is referring to, I think what it's meaning by roll is it's referring to the slight tilt that happens with the ship. But basically this controls the whole movement of the cannon itself, and this controls the speed of the projectile. And basically this calls what's called a singleton. I'm still trying to figure out what that is a little bit more. This here allows for it detects to see if there's any extra singleton there. I know what I'm just. And this is where you get the axes for the horizontal and vertical axis, which allow you to move both up and down, left and right. That's where you're calling the input axes. And basically this sets your speed to this. It sets the speed of which you're moving. That's how you connect with the X and Y axis and how it moves at different speeds. So yeah, basically this would be multiplying times the speed of 30 whenever you, and it'd be also multiplying by the time it takes. And this basically controls how I fire my cannon with the space button, space bar. And here you're instantiating your projectile game object, and you're setting it to, you're setting the transform position to transform position, and you're getting a component for its rigid body, and you're setting its velocity to the up direction, and you're setting it to the speed of 40. And here is where you would have the on trigger enter for the ship if it was going to get hit. I'm still working on that a little bit, but but that's essentially what happens here, is that your shield level is set at 1, and if you get hit, it goes to 0, and then you'd be gone and you'd reset. And this basically just sets your shield value from somewhere between 0 and 4. At least that's what it would show, the minimum value that you can. And if it ever reaches, that sets your range at least. And if it's ever less than 0, it destroys your ship. So, yeah. And, okay. And basically here, this was a simple, for the main menu, it manages the main menu. When you click the play button, it loads your game, your first game scene. And when you click on the quit button, it allows you to quit. Your projectile basically allows also for a bound check. And you're looking for the bounds check component. And if your bounds is all the way in the upper top corner, if it ever reaches there, it destroys the object as soon as it gets there. Any questions, anyone?
One quick question.
Yeah.
You know, the late update, do you know how often that updates?
I'm not for certain. Let me go check.
It was in the first script.
It was in the first one?
Yeah.
Okay, project. Oh, the very first one I had.
Yeah, first.
Yeah. Essentially, and I was, I'm not exactly sure. I know,
You can search for it.
yeah,
Yeah.
Search for Unity Lifecycle event.
Yeah.
And let's see.
sure.
What it says about that late update.
There's the late update after all update functions have been called.
So is it always called, or does it get skipped if you're?
So it's like a run last.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh.
But if you have too much activity to fit in your refresh rate, does it run anyway? Something sort of gets skipped,
Yeah.
Your machine is getting a little
Yeah,
slow,
that is a good question though. Yeah.
So I don't know, I think late update will always run no matter what. I think that's one of the.
Yeah.
Does it give time to load everything in?
Yeah, make sure
Yeah.
that something changed.
Yeah,
How you get those little glitches sometimes.
exactly. Yeah. Well,
Any others? Give them a hand. Great job.
thank you.
Was you in your own team?
I actually did this. I did this one on my own.
That's good. Good job.
Skills USA messed up his team.
It's okay. It's okay. Okay. So do I do the stop share?
Yep.
Stop share. Okay. And leave.
Just mesh however you want. If you guys want to go ahead.
Yeah, we can all do it.
Sure.
Otherwise,
You just set the mood however you like. Take a little nap.
Where's the? Oh, that is.
Okay. Now I'm going to turn it off. There we go.
Seriously, you said that exact one. Actually, I still do.
you got the input button.
Somewhere. Don't ask me how to use it.
How do you change the input on here? You know? Miss Riley, do you know how to change the input?
Oh, fancy.
Yeah.
And you scored long enough?
Read a box, girl.
What HDMI are you plugged into? Should be 2, right?
Two. Yeah. Was it up there?
Touch screen, isn't
Yes, it is.
it?
Cool, cool.
All right, so my name is Anthony Tenenbaum,
Braden Bell.
Jails.
and we don't know if you heard of a game called Block Wars. I didn't until we started this, but we got one called Space Wars, and pretty much you got a block, a rectangle, and you got a small map with different tiles, and you got to move your block on those tiles in a way so you can drop it down into a hole. You get into the hole, and so many moves, you can go on to the next level. And the audience for this would be pretty much all ages. That's probably about 8 to up, maybe 9 plus, but they should be able to do that pretty easy.
Just whoever can use it.
I personally played this game on mini clip in 7th grade. So.
Yeah, it's the strategic type game, so you can, a little bit of critical thinking going on with it. It's a puzzle game. It's not a very big game, so it's pretty fast to load, real simple to do and get the hang of. Pretty simple to get the hang of the controls. There can be some competitiveness with it. See, because the goal is to get to the hole so many moves. We didn't quite implement that in this project. We just made it so you get it into the hole, you move on to the next one. But the goal is in so many moves, you fell. Also, if the block falls off the map, the tiles, it restarts. And how do we get to?
You just X down for that. And then right there to load the game.
Oh, here you go. Sorry.
Yeah. Just double click there.
Oh yeah, there it is.
And hopefully we have sound.
Windowed. Yeah. Yeah, we forgot to put an escape key in, so when you do want to exit, you're not exiting. You're stuck in the game.
So here's our little UI that Jay actually made. Super cool. Even with Easter right around the corner at the time that we made this. We had
So yeah, that's just a preview video. The idea was we just didn't have time. We were actually gonna record some gameplay and have it in that little clip frame.
Yeah.
And that was actually just a royalty-free video that I found online to be able to use as a sample. But
that way we don't get to see it.
the exit button works. You can actually exit that from the main menu. We just don't have any looping or connections back to the main menu. So unless you get all the way through.
Yeah, if you get to the 3rd level, it brings you back. And so we got a moves counter, count your moves. And it uses the arrow keys, the up and down and right and left.
And we'll have it fall off. We'll restart. Oh, my bad. I held it down.
I still can't beat the 3rd level.
Yeah, that was really tough, actually.
Yeah, right now, you can still glitch the game out.
So,
You can also cheat.
Yeah.
At the moment, we need to increase our mass in our block. But if you wanted to, you could just flip all the way across.
Yeah, you can just pretend there's no error there.
Go down one more.
He's trying to use cheat codes and still not doing it.
Jump it.
Yeah, show him you can jump it.
oh,
There you go. You might as well. right now.
Oh, I got it.
That's what happens when you try to cheat.
And then you just mix that, and you should be able to open a community.
But that's the basics of the game right there.
Alright.
Some further implementation, if you ever go online and play the real one, what happens in between scenes is they have like a round summary UI come up, and it displays your moves, and it displays the ideal move, like the lowest number possible to complete the round, and that's really how you score yourself on this game. And then on the online version, because it's online, what they do is each level actually has a key code at the top. So like the way that you save your spot is you write down that key code, and the next time you come back, you just type in that key code and it takes you straight to that level, which is kind of cool for further implementation. We didn't really plan on going through like all the code. Is there anything specifically that anybody wants to see?
And the movement may look easy. I assure you, I had to get help online to get it done correctly. Because my first implementation of it, I got it moving correctly, but it was stepping up each move. You would go up by 5 on the y-axis. That took forever to figure out. Well, I took help.
This is the main script. Did you want to explain it a little more? Is that good?
And that's good.
All right.
But
Kind of our main script here.
yeah, you guys got any questions about any of it?
The next level. Something else that's kind of cool is we had to do a shader. So if we could go,
Yeah,
where's our scenes?
in the photo scene.
So these are each blocks, but what I started off doing is making them 1 or 2, like 0.1 or 0.2 spaces away. And that was dumb because if the block is set to a specific height or whatever, it wouldn't land correctly on each block. So I had to put them exactly together and then make a shader actually, which is this here, which will set your outline, which is
The S outline.
yeah, it's this one here. And this you can actually it actually has a so you can mess with it however thick you want your and you can do like a blur, stuff like that. So this actually ended up being pretty cool, but it's something that I had to mess with. It took a little bit of time.
Also, something that kind of stumped us right off the bat is the box colliders that's on that's on the tiles and the player itself. We had to adjust the colliders on the tiles because a player wouldn't go in the hole; it gets stuck. So the collider itself does affect that.
Right.
We had to reduce the collider on the tiles going around the goal, the green block, so a player block could actually squeeze through there.
Almost like it had too much friction. Like it fit perfectly, but it would get stuck. So that took a little bit of time to figure out.
How did you create the different maps?
These are each just prefabs with tiles.
So you just kind of created each scene.
Yeah, I believe we did.
Tile
Yeah.
by tile.
They look really neat.
Yeah, Braden did that.
If we were at first, we were thinking about implementing a generator, but the fact that you have to have puzzle and
Right.
the way the paths work, it was easier
Just
to
to create it.
create like actual.
That way you know like you can complete the level, because if it's randomly generated, like
Might not be able to complete it.
we don't want to produce something that you can't finish. So yeah.
Any other questions?
Questions, concerns?
Give me one.
All right, thanks.
I like that.
The video background on.
I'll
Okay.
do this guy here.
Okay. So it depends. So there's 2 different ways that we did this here. We go to scenes. I guess we're already on a scene, aren't we?
Yeah.
So I got this video player right here. And on this particular one, all you have to do is create a new video player, which you can just do by the components. And then you go over here and then you just drag your video clip where it says video clip and then render mode. you can select this, and the difference between the far plane and the near plane is like when you have your camera, if you're looking at your camera and you know it's got that visual representation of it, like its view angle, well, all the way out is far plane, and then like right up in the camera's face is near plane. And then, so that's how each level works. And then you actually have to go through here and fit some of your aspect ratios. And most of these videos were originally 4K, and I had to slim them down to 1080 because at least my laptop for one wouldn't like I was skipping frames and stuff. So now the main menu is a little bit different. So on here, you actually have to get a video to play on something specific. Get in here.
Video.
So you still have to have the video player because it's like your controller, and you still drag and drop your video and stuff on here. The difference is you have to select render texture, and then you actually have to go into the components up here and create a new render texture, and then you have to set the video to that render texture. And then what's really cool about that is the square right here, which is the video frame. You see, like all it has is that render text. And the cool thing about that is any 3D object that you want, whether it be UI or game object, if you wanted to, you could create like a sphere. Maybe it's like your town square. And as long as you apply that render texture, it will render a whole video around that sphere. So it's pretty cool. It took a while to figure out because the background video is really easy. The video texture took a lot of work. So once you know how to do it, it's actually super easy. But it's recommended that if you want a flat screen UI video, to create a 3D object called a quad. And I'm not sure the difference between that and like a cube or something, but it's pretty much just a flat plane. So anything else?
This one?
I still want
Do my age?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and technically right now you can hold down the button and it continuously moves too.
Which is fine. I mean, the real version is that.
Yeah.
Oh, it does? Yeah. Oh, okay.
It just loves to implement the counter.
Yeah. And it
If
will.
they want to.
Okay, cool. So, hey everybody, my name is Richard. I'm Tyler.
And I'm Dylan Beeler.
And we have 2 bricks and some pie. That's what we call our game.
2 bricks and some pie.
And basically, I know it doesn't look super elegant, but it took us quite a bit of time to get it to work. We have 2 bricks here that we calculated out their masses, and we were calculating out their velocities. We were cleaning them off of each other until they calculated pi to a specifically specified digit count.
Yeah.
It's for all ages.
All ages, the calculations handled by the computer. So basically what we ended up having to do is this smaller block here always has a mass of 1 kilogram. And then the bigger block, its mass is calculated by having 100 to the power of digits minus 1. And so the mass of this second block just expands exponentially. It's just huge if you want more digits. But
using a physics equation, it's the conservation of momentum and energy to calculate their velocities whenever they hit each other. And this is the scenario we're using will never occur in real life, because every time these blocks hit a wall, which is actually at just x equals 0, we're just multiplying by -1 to have it bounce off, which it's like a 100% elastic collision, which will never happen in the real world. But for a simulation, whenever the amount of times the blocks bounce off of each other and the wall, it starts calculating digits of pi, which if you get into the complicated sides of it, it has to do with if you map the velocities on a circle and then add the arc lengths, if you have taken enough math to know what that means, that's how it calculates digits of pi. So we'll go ahead and run it here doing 4 digits. And because this big block is so massive and they're not technically supposed to go past 0, it knows they're here but just throws them off the screen. But if you can see here, it calculated 3.141, which is the first 4 digits of pi. And we can actually increase that to any number you want. It's just going to have to count to ridiculous amounts. So right now, it's only 3,000. But if you want 5 digits, it's 30,000. 6 digits, 300,000. And so that takes a long time for it to count there. And the reason that this block, whenever you run it here, whenever you run it here, this movement is very fast. Even though I have it set to just move x by 1, it's actually the time frame in the game. We've increased it to move 20 times faster than real time.
Yeah, we had frame issues when we were figuring it out.
Yeah. Something interesting that we figured out was when Rick and I were trying to get this code to work, our first instinct was to do rigid bodies, because that's how you get the on-collision enter to work, because we wanted to detect when they were hitting each other. And what
they were causing like multiple collisions.
Yes.
And then you had to worry about, because we were trying to do an instance where one collision would detect it. And we originally had on collisions on each one, but the problem was you'd have one collision detecting and then doing the function, and then the other collision detecting and doing the function. So they would, in effect, either like cancel out, or the objects would physically attach to each other, and then like just go off the plane. It's super weird.
So like they would just ram into each other, and one would have a velocity of 0, the other one would be pushing the other one. So we're not really sure how that calculation works. But if you didn't lock the Y and Z plane, it would just start to like curl off into nowhere. And
so it was like we just kind of had to say, sorry, physics engine, we're going to do our own thing today.
Yep, so we just said, Unity, you will not handle our physics, we're going to calculate our own, and we'll see that in the code here. So, but anyone like to, you want to see it run one more time before we get into the code?
Yeah.
Okay.
6 digits.
Do 6 digits?
Okay.
Oh my goodness, that's gonna.
And by the way, doing your own physics isn't always bad thing. It's a good thing to learn.
Yeah. Okay, it's set to 6. Oh, you're gonna have to do it again. It was running.
Oh, sorry. For all ages.
32 digits
Cool.
of pi.
We'll be here for a while.
Yeah, it's gonna have to count quite a bit. But it'll just go flying off the screen, so you'll see here. It's just gonna go off into the void for quite some time, and this is just gonna freak out because technically both blocks are stuck in this location until it comes back on the screen. And I mean, as you can see, it takes a long time.
And I guess we could have sped it up more, couldn't we? No.
Yeah, so like I tried doing it 50 times, and the number really didn't change much faster than 20 times. And so I just left it at 20 times. So it will eventually
It will hit
get
that
there.
3. Yeah, you'll see it eventually. It just takes time and belief.
One problem that happens here is Unity, for some reason, is really fond of the float variable type, which is a 32-bit signature for numbers. And because the mass of this object scales so quickly, if you try and do 10 digits, that mass is so large that it will crash because the float value can't handle that size of a number. And also, this goes flying off the screen so far as well. So like it'll end up at like -100,000. So it's really weird. But Unity does, however, keep these calculations really precise. So like if you were to try and do this in like JavaScript, you actually have to put a time step in there because it doesn't do all the calculations quick enough, where Unity just handles everything other than our collision physics and a couple of bounce options. So that's not even, is it close? No, that's only at 50,000. So it's gonna be a while unless you want me to stop it. And move on. Okay.
What inspired you guys to?
Oh, I guess we can just let it sit there. Let's just.
Well, to be honest, we were thinking, man, like, how do we come up with a simple game? And then we found the most complicated, simple game you could. And then that's how it happened.
Yeah. We honestly thought, oh, we'll just sit down for like an hour and knock this out. And Rick and I spent 7 hours at a coffee shop trying to get it to work. Oh, it was bad. It was bad.
For trying to go simple.
So here's this is the thing that's tied to that main camera, which just allows us to specify the digits and then see the count, which is the number of times things bounce off each other. And it gets kind of complicated because you're having to do a lot of get components, the block, because the block holds a lot of functions and information that we need. So on start, we just grab references to their tags and then run this block setup, which grabs their XYZ positions and sets them to certain things based on where the game prefab was. And then
Vector positions are weird to manipulate too. They don't like, for some reason, when you try to specify the vector position type by the position of that specific orientation. I don't know why it doesn't like it, but it's weird.
Here's that mass calculation. So you just have a 100 raised to the power of digits minus 1, and you set it equal to that get component block dot mass. And so you'll see this a lot. And then here in our fixed update, we have our move function for big and small block. And then this is a function if they collide or not, which gets kind of messy because this is the big block component, the is collide function in there, and then you have to pass it the small block's block component. And then if they do end up colliding, it runs this function that we created here. And then if the small block hits the wall, it runs here and makes a count.
So have you run it with Task Manager going to look at your performance?
No, wouldn't that'd be
Could we
interesting.
try
Yeah, sure. I'll just do this right here.
Got it.
that?
So what do? You go performance.
Let's see what it does.
So CPU looks like it's using absolutely nothing. And GPU is barely doing anything. Is it done?
Still running?
It's still running.
No,
No,
it's
running.
still counting. It's about
There we go.
halfway.
We did really well with performance.
So,
optimization.
Yes, very.
That was our main goal, actually.
Yeah. I didn't even really worry about that.
Yeah, look at this memory though. It's using half. So that's mostly Windows.
That's the least important part of the computer.
Yeah.
Well, I think
So let's see. Here's how we move the block, and this is something we ran into, right? So we wanted to just do the block dot transform position dot x because really we're only working in the x position. But whenever you're on this side of the equal sign, it's a get only variable. There's no way to physically set it. So if you, instead of adding dot x to the end, you just leave it as position. Position in this case is a vector 3 and it is settable. So then, we just use this information from this top row that we calculated and then plug that vector into the new block. Or into the same block, but it's new information. And then run block setup again so that we can set those x, y, and z values. And then our block class is relatively simple. We just have a velocity and a mass, and then some getters and setters for the x, y, and z's, which are hidden by this little plus area here. And sadly uses the old version of getters and setters because Unity runs on an older version of Visual Studio,
Yes.
which is a shame.
Oh, yeah. What was the other thing it didn't do? Tuples.
Oh yeah,
Because it
tuples don't exist.
Done this
really?
in the community.
Which is a shame because it would have really helped us out here.
Mhm.
Um, here's our collide function. So like we said, because we weren't using rigid bodies, we actually can't use the on collision enter because that's how it detects if things are touching each other. So we just ended up getting the position between the two blocks. and if they're greater than or equal to 200, return false or true.
Oh, that's really good, and that's really an important point to everybody that you can do that, right? Because you know where they are on your
Yes.
screen, so you don't have to go with
So
method.
this function here, just to see how far apart they were, was really hard to figure out because their X position is measured from the middle of the block. So you have to take into account what your scale is. And so it ended up being a difference of 200. And that's how we got it to figure out.
Now, one way you can always counter that is you can put an empty game object on your object itself, like on the edge,
Yeah.
where you want it to be at, so it's not always in that center point.
Okay, yeah. There you go. That'd be an interesting way to do it. And then down here, it's if it hits a wall. So if X position is less than or equal to 0, then return the velocity times -1, which this is that completely elastic collision, which basically just reverses its direction. Like I said, that would never, ever happen in the real world.
This is why it's a video game, guys.
Yep. And then, so here is that function for the conservation of momentum and energy. And because you have to break it into parts, it gets a little complicated. So you need the sum of the masses, and you need, because velocity is part of the equation, we wanted to have our own variable for whenever we changed it. And so basically, you take this object's mass minus the others, divided by the sum, multiplied by the current velocity. And then you take this new velocity variable and add it and set it equal to, so it's like, this equation is all something over another thing. And so this first part is the top half of the equation, and this second part's the bottom half, and that's why you have to add it to it. And then you return that new velocity. And let's see if this is done. Maybe.
Maybe we ran out of memory.
Nope, it's still going. But eventually it'll reach that point. So you can kind of, no, you can't see it, can you? Oh, I guess you can. So here's the block. It looks like it's starting to come back towards us finally.
And again, with this, you have some frame issues too, because it's going to process a lot quicker.
Yeah.
So we don't always see every time they're colliding, unfortunately.
Yeah, if we, when this one's done running, we'll turn the game time back to 1, which is regular time, and we'll just do 3 digits so that you can see the actual movement of the objects a little better.
So yeah, sorry about that.
You can X out that one if you want to go ahead and do that.
Okay, do you not want to see its
Oh,
final
it's
result?
fine. I understand as well.
Okay.
Got it.
So if you go into edit, this is something interesting. You go into edit and you go to project settings and then time. And this allows you to edit. Oh, we probably need to stop this. This allows us to edit the time scale. And so if you just press 1. 1 is regular time, and from there it's just multiplicative. So if you put a 5, it's 5 times 10, it's 10 times. And so then we need to go into our hierarchy. We need to set, where is it? Main camera. There we go. Change that to 1. And then I think that's all we need to do. Let's see. 3. Yeah. So you'll see big block moves, and because they both have the same mass, it will come to a complete stop, bounce off the wall, come to a complete stop, and then go off infinitely. They'll never touch again, and the count is 3. Pretty cool. So are there any questions for us?
I will say it's very, very impressive.
It was rough. I gotta say, it was rough.
It was a very,
Yeah, but you guys learned a very good lesson.
I
on
don't
how to
think
be
physics is easy.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I tell you, it was hilarious because we're like, yes, they're finally bouncing off each other. But then you would get the anomaly where they would just ram each other and go flying off into nowhere. And you're like, what are you doing? And it's just the rigid body was interfering with our calculations because the system was like, okay, well, it has a mass of this. But then we were saying, no, you actually have a mass of this. And so whenever they'd hit each other, it was just all wonky.
It was wild. And then
That's why it won't work for NVIDIA. I'll never program for that.
What's the counter in the bottom left?
Counter? Where at?
Next to the.
Down
like
here?
in the
Oh, that's
console?
just our
Oh,
console.
I believe it's still outputting some kind of console.
So because
commands.
we only required the first digit, it's gonna only return that first.
Okay.
So right now, somewhere in my debug, it's printing out whatever the object was, but I don't know. It was originally getting that collision function to work and finally getting that calculation to come out correctly took a lot of tries, and so I was having to print out what is their distance between each other so I can get them to always calculate it anywhere on the screen. Because the problem we were running into, I was like, okay, well, this block is starting at 100 and this other block's starting at 300. So obviously the distance between is this. So just take whatever value it is and subtract this number. Well, if he moves over to here, that no longer applies. So it was difficult to get that working. Any other questions?
Pretty awesome.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Those are just blocks.
Probably would work with spears.
I mean, you could really logistically, you could pop any game object. You can make it a banana. You just have to take into account the size of the game object and be able to subtract out that distance. So if you put in something, you just have to make sure to count for the distance that each of those would center off, and then you could do find it.
It's like you have to take into account its scale. So its X scale is 300. And so obviously our camera is way zoomed out here just because we wanted the objects to appear bigger. But other than that, you're good to go. And you can see some default values for the mass. And then you just change those later. Cool. Awesome. All done?
Nice.
I'm pretty sorry. Sorry.
You guys are clear?
If you ever need to calculate like 6 digits high, we got you.
How much
does it take you?
99 cents on the outside.
Yeah.
I used to be able to remember to the 9th digit.
10 digits crashing.
With me, I can only do math by writing it out. It's the only way I can do it.
In my head, that makes it hard to grade because then you don't know what path you took. Let's see.
It should show up if you guys
There are certain things.
Let's see if it does. How many digits is
I always prefer to find out how I get it.
You're fluent?
Or it's like a flat. I don't know.
Yeah, right. I'm just slow. There's like slack last night. I used to
wasn't doing mathematics and science.
I honestly, my science, but I guess with I enjoy math a lot. I just I'm one of those people that I just like to try to out.
Download like on Microsoft.
I do it on my head. There's classes that you try to
It's like 3 plus 2 equals 5.
It's too long.
Like 6 nights, like or the
I'm meaning I'm talking like stuff that
Like one of those, no flavor is like 30,000.
Oh, that's like
No. It's
yeah.
that's the reason I got it.
but I mean, yeah, you would ask me with the whenever it starts to
Yeah.
Supposedly, I
think
I would remember when I took our class, the 0-1. It's either really light or dark.
to the pi I plus 1 equals
So the way I pass my chain project is like that's what I know there's one shade, and then I would come back and start using my shade back to say first and just keep doing that.
Yeah. The only
You watch my art teacher go and start and you can always start dark, like and you can go dark and then like slowly fade out. You know what I mean? I've been like, if you look at my like history, I'd be like, you know what I mean? I was all over the place. I really enjoyed that project. It's like a 2-point band project.
you're trying
And
to,
like, rulers and stuff.
I think you're trying to match up
We
rows
made
and
like
columns.
we made like a city block.
From the right side.
Oh,
You guys, the house is where it's like stuff that right now. I see it now when everyone's on that right here. And it does have to like draw a
I totally, you know,
this is simple as like a window.
So you know I have this black.
It doesn't really get started until like they get going. She, the other day, she acted
I
like
enjoyed the class, so.
she wasn't too worried.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, there's the original Frosty Road, the Mercedes where you're jumping on the platform. And then there's also Lava Beach you gotta run from. That is the second gen. You have a velocity.
It's not very connected to technology
We're just doing.
Then you're like just barely kind of.
Yeah, that's why I was one. I don't know what it does.
we got to
Maybe strip while you're walking.
Whole multiplier equals 1 times the second. Show the power theory as it's.
So right now you have to go on.
And just have it on the
Yeah. Well, I tried that. Or at least, unless you Jesus, look how much scrolling. It's slow, that good.
Yeah. Oh, until you press a button, you don't actually jump, but that will adjust how much force you do when you do jump.
Yes. It's
But jump multiplayer.
I'll just look at it again. Okay, so the point of this game is to launch the ball and hit any of those targets. I think it's like 50 points for the big red ones, 100 for the smaller purple ones, and then 200 for the tiny blue ones. And you can rotate. The rotation is kind of weird, but then when you click, this little blue bar down here is how much force you have behind it. So then got the 100 over there. Wait. There we go. So
Just barely drop it on the red one below you.
yeah, I got the 200.
It's me, isn't it? See that screw going on?
Oh, okay.
What? The scroll. No.
Oh, screw. Whatever. I thought you kept saying scroll and talking about that bar at the bottom.
Your beautiful game, and he's like,
This was 1:30 in the morning, so. The only problem is I was having trouble with getting it to like aim where I'm aiming this, because if you aim over here, it'll shoot. Well, it's doing better now. See, like if you aim all the way over here, it doesn't actually aim where you're aiming. And then once you get so far, it turns really slow. Yeah, it doesn't aim exactly where you're aiming. And I was trying to mess with the
Well, I guess before I exit this, why is it still counting? You only have 10 shots. Right now it's at 0.
What's your ball time?
It says score right there. The ball timer is, it's like, so when you launch the ball, it's so it won't immediately spawn another one, because like it'll launch it, and while it's launching, it'll spawn one and they'll collide and destroy themselves. So it's like 100 frames have to pass before you can get another one. And then you get 10 shots, and once that reaches 100, the ball timer, you can get another ball. That's really it. You just hit those and your score goes up, and you get 10 shots to do it. This was the script on the slingshot. So these are all the variables. On the start, it just defines all the variables. And in the update, this is for the ball timer. If the ball timer, okay, how did I do this ball timer? Oh. If it's not equal to 100 or greater than that, oh, no, this is when it reaches 100, it sets this to true so you can get a new ball, and then resets the ball timer to 0. But if the ball is fired and fired gets set to true when you fire it here, this is okay, I think this is on mouse up. Oh no, it's just when you click. So when you click, it goes through here, takes a shot away. Ball timer equals 0, just to reset it. Goes through the kinematic, all the physics and everything. This is where I was having trouble getting the rotation to work, because I was trying to mess with like Euler angles and all those other things, but I couldn't figure any of them out. So I was just doing the rotation itself. But so rotating the thing itself is fine. It'll rotate when you hit the keys. But getting that rotation, like if the rotation is -15 or something, and then you get that rotation and try to apply it to the vector for the ball you're launching, it's like -0.01 or something like that. I don't know why it is such a difference. So I was trying to multiply it by 100, but it's still, it's like negative, if you're at -15 for your slingshot rotation, the vector that it returns here after you multiply it and everything will be like 200 instead of 1.5 or 150 or something like that. I don't know why it is such a difference, but I guess it's just Unity. I'm sure you could do it with the Euler angles, and I think that there's like quad. Yeah, that. I didn't figure any of that stuff out. But so this is just for launching it and respawning new ones. This is the slider for increasing the force, and just when you scroll the mouse up, you get more force. When you scroll it down, you get less. Left and right arrows for turning the slingshot, and this is for the ball. If the ball touches anything, then the ball gets destroyed. And I have this script applied to all of those targets. So it, on collision, it'll detect. I have them tagged as large, medium, and small. And
Line
so
26 is where you change the score.
yeah, that's what I was going to do.
There it is.
It's
also
actually on all of them.
30, yeah.
Copy and
Where
paste.
do you like update your little power bar?
Power
Like
bar?
as they scroll, how it went up and down?
I think those are all right. It was, yeah, this input get axis, that's the scroll wheel on the mouse. And so when you scroll up, if it's greater than 0, then it'll increase the force.
So is that just like a slider component?
Yeah, I just put a slider in there,
Okay,
and this is at the top up here. You have to do a public slider, and then I just named it slider, and slider.value plus equals, and you have to actually put all it loads. You have to right here. You have to actually put the it's in the canvas down here.
I'm just linking it together.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
you change your script. No, it's thinking about it.
Is you just drag this slider over here and put it in there.
And is that just a built-in game object? Like you just do new slider?
Yeah, it's under UI slider right there.
That's cool. Probably use that for like health bars and stuff too.
Yeah, that's what it has a handle on it, and this handle you can toggle it on and off, so you can use it as like a pull slider,
Oh, cool.
or you can just use it as like the health bar and stuff like that. And to change the way it works is the black, you change the background, and the fill area is just this little fill right there.
Cool.
And so the way I was getting the force is slider out value, and then the force would be, I don't even remember where that was. Oh, it was just, oh, I just set it to the value of the slider, and it would multiply it by 10. And I think you can change like the max value on the slider and then how much it goes up per tick. Or you can toggle it between whole numbers and float to go up per tick. Yeah, then on the goals, it's just compares the tag to the string and finds which one it matches. If it hits the ground, it just disappears and doesn't do anything. But I mean, if anyone knows how I could get the vector for this to work, just shoot it right.
Have you tried putting that after the 100?
No.
Probably, I don't think that helps.
Yeah, it still does it.
Yeah, there's some videos on YouTube if you want to learn more about the U angles and quaternion. I suggest looking at that. You don't necessarily have to understand all the math. There's a lot of math.
Yeah.
And it can get complicated. I don't even understand that. But once you play with it, you kind of get the hang of it.
Mm-hmm.
What you're doing is you're turning it on the Y axis.
Yeah.
And doing it by that.
Well, I was getting the y-axis of the slingshot, but it doesn't. Let's see if I still have it in here. I think I have it. When you do it like this, so you can see the Y on here. Oh no, never mind. When it's negative 21 and you launch one, the Y that it prints out is negative 0.18. All those numbers, I don't know where it gets that number from. Unless maybe it's well, no, that wouldn't this dot transformation should be for the slingshot or the launcher, since I have the script on here, right? It should be getting the value of this one.
What's that value say?
Negative 21.716. Not really sure where it's getting the 0.18 from.
The projectile show.
The projectile 0. So the way I'm doing this, because I couldn't get the Euler angles to work, is I'm just setting, like, the force for the slider is going straight forward, but I have the z-axis hitting either left or right. It's like adding force to one side or the other. Which is why it's also harder, because the more you increase the force, the more force you're going to need to go this way or this way to get it to go in a straight line. So maybe this is working. I just need to scale it with the slider more. But when I was trying to scale it with the slider, it was just making the force too much. So I'm sure there's a way we could scale it 100%. Is there anything else you wanted to ask about?
Could you make those gumdrops?
Yeah. Right now, no. Yeah.
Pretty good, guys.
Yeah,
It's great. I like it. They look like
David's hiding up there. I think he's gonna seriously stuff about that. Maybe.
Well,
Maybe.
without both controllers, it won't let me use the controller for the VR to actually shoot. But you can still see in game. It's just without both controllers, it does not input the fire button from just the left. So have them off for now, just to hope that they will both be able to turn on for presentation. Is everybody gone?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Let me start the Zoom session.
I'm sorry. Carry on until next time. Martin text is here.
Martin text is logging, but it didn't work. I checked to make sure it was correct. I told him it didn't work, but he has yet to work. Hopefully.
So I can get those options on there. Turn back up. My screen thermal hard.
You're using Unreal, aren't you?
Yeah. Now, thanks to this being an HP WMR, I have to cast it through my Steam VR, and there are two softwares aside from just the Steam VR that you'll have to download from the Steam engine in order to run this type of VR headset. So this one was definitely a pain to get up and running. And as you can see, I've got the headset paired. Now the screen monitor's on. Now let's find out how much battery is left. Because these controllers are very battery draining, as you can probably tell.
Yeah.
They line up like a Christmas tree.
And so the right one out of the show. So now, let's turn the right hand back on, or else I won't be able to use it.
You're drawing.
I like to say we play magic wands.
Yes.
Doing magic things.
I want to pay P5.
Well, I changed the vibe up here. It's because I don't have it. No, wait, this. Yeah, this is Oculus Rift.
So if you search right
Still,
now,
that's not heading right.
HTC vibe. So it's going to be like, this one is not better than one. It's
Yeah.
HTC. We were just looking yesterday. Why does it say HP?
Yeah.
Because that's what this one is. It's HP. So it's very similar.
Make sure the controllers at least do.
We're probably trying to get, like, people are trying to get as far as devices and services.
As you can tell, the battery is extremely low. Now, here's the fun part. Here's all the different views, the mobile, new editor window, but this one is the one we'll be using. And yes, the HP window still keeps shutting that from the main. Okay. So you'll be able to see what I see for the most part. Except for right now it's trying to connect because that screen auto went back to this one as the main for some reason, which is one problem this has. It'll occasionally jump back a little bit. And if I can find my mouse. Didn't fix it. Yeah, as you can tell, this is a real pain.
Show you for a second.
And in here, it's registering that it's running 20 to 50 of 16.7 ms. So the 60 hertz is probably going a wee bit fast. Even with low resolution. So I might not be able to let you guys play it because I can get it to run smoothly at home. It's just
Everybody might have to just go up there and try it.
yeah. I mean, you can see for a brief second before it.
Yeah, because it's just too much for it.
Yeah.
Because that's a lot of resources.
Yeah.
I might push that way.
You don't have your laptop plugged in.
And then, yeah,
I've got it plugged in. It's got power cord.
he's handling it. That Zoom session is going to throw it right over the top. Boy,
I
I
mean-
think it takes a lot of resources to run that.
Now you can tell it's slightly going behind with everything it's trying to run right now. So I've got 5 things open right now. So I'm going to cast this as a new editor window.
Instead of worrying about running it, David, can you show everybody what you had to do in Unreal to create the application that works with it? Because I think that's probably more beneficial for everybody because they've seen apps. But what did you have to do to create it?
Let me get this one. Minus up. This is probably going to cause a little delay. So I'm going to I don't need that. And the widget's only showing how many shots you fired. So if I go down to the first person, open up this widget. Now zoom out. This is for whenever I'm spawning the projectile. If they are using the AVR set, then the Boolean VR marker is set to true. So then this will basically track which buttons you are pressing. The left trigger will reset because that is defaulted to the jump command, and I have my jump overridden by a reset level. I have everything commented this time. Reroute the jump to jump start again. Because I initially set it to where they didn't have a jump, and instead of creating a new listen event and putting it to a different key, I decided just to repurpose the jump because I didn't want them jumping over the hurdle, so you couldn't just walk out there and shoot or shove the blocks off the edge without actually having to shoot them. So now you can't really cheat because if you try to jump over it, well, and there's also another fun thing. I tried crawling under it with the VR. It still won't let you. But you can look under it and fire from under it. You just can't crawl under it, unfortunately. I tried to break it with VR. Okay, so that is the shooting, the actual projectile. And here's the HUD, or the main display. And this is where I'm creating that widget to say that is what I want to display. And that's the only real thing I'm displaying on that is how many shots you take for the player 0. And since there's only one person on there, I don't think it'll run smoothly with multiple people unless I make multiple aspects. Now this is going to check if you're using an HMD and controllers are enabled, which is basically just the headset and 2 controllers. If both controllers aren't on whenever you start it, then it's going to say it's false even if you are using a headset. So you won't be able to just use one controller to shoot. You'll have to have both controllers, or else you won't be able to fully use the VR.
But could you make it so you can only use one controller? Is that like an option?
If I manipulated it, I might be able to, but I'd have to look further into it. Because is head monitor display enabled? And so that is going to return if it is true or not. And if it is true, then set controller rotation yaw to true, meaning that's going to pretty much where you're aiming is front. And then it'll be able to position based on its own monitoring to track where you're looking. And yes, you will have to look at your targets. I have not routed the positioning to the controller, so you can't really turn your gun around and shoot yourself because your gun is literally locked on your camera. And using motion controllers, since that was already set right there, will determine all this. If I could stop right-clicking on the dills and actually move it, set in hidden in game the target, so you will only see the VR mesh instead of the actual person mesh. And the same is true whenever you use the other mesh. It is hidden. The VR mesh is hidden, which if I go and zoom in, you can see that there are 2 guns currently in one set of arms. The 2 guns are actually what's the VR as compared to the normal display console. And so being able to determine that, and I went way too far.
What's that chair?
Just cosmetics. I put 2 chairs, a table, and 2 lamps. I do not have the lamps actually lit. Because whenever I had it lit, they were way too bright. But then whenever I dimmed them down, the walls, how I made them, they absorb all light. So it didn't matter if I had them on dim or bright. Because if it was on bright, they were way too bright. But if they were on dim, you can't see them. There's the table. Jump to restart. And another hidden trick, if I can turn around just slightly to where I can see the text on the wall. Actually, if I get out of that, into come on, view it. No. This is taking a while because I have way too many things going right now. But I don't have the text actually locked on the block whenever you start the level. That might be easier to display. These text phrases, focus on the game, walk up, If I look just right, you can see how they are hovering over away from the wall. I don't have them locked on the wall. I have them basically hologrammed to where they're just positioned slightly away from the wall. And so the point of the game is to knock all the blocks off the edge with as few shots possible. My average tends to be around 11 to 13. My highest score yet is 8. And there are 14 blocks. So that is very hard to do. But as you can tell, the bullets have a velocity multiplier on impact. So when you hit the blocks, they go flying because it's a 1,000 times velocity multiplier. And I increased the lifespans of the bullets so that if you were to shoot them and they stop on the ground, you can bounce your other bullets right off of them, helping you shoot around the corners. And there are 3 hard to see pillars. If I turn this, right here is one. You can slightly see the smoke material. And there's a second one in this back corner, and the third one's right here. They are extremely hard to see. They aren't meant to be necessarily visible unless you're flying. But I didn't want to make them completely invisible or transparent.
So will those block your shot? Is that what they're for?
They can block your shot, or you can bounce them off of each other, off the blocks off the walls into other blocks, or you can shoot behind the blocks to launch them forward if you are good enough with reflecting it off the pillars. Other than that, it is extremely hard.
Well, try it if you like, and think about how he was able to create a VR game pretty quickly. And I know it's not a full-fledged game, but these kind of apps are really, really popular right now. Training applications are being used really heavily for VR apps. And if you think about some of the things that you guys saw today, using video on the 3D objects, that's really big in VR, where you might have the bubbles going with different videos, and when someone walks up to them or touches them, it opens for that whole training thing or whatever. So that's used really heavily. Anatomy, physiology, stepping into things, any sort of app like that. It's really heavy into VR right now. The future is just wide open. There are companies in Springfield that are hiring people for these apps. I mean, we had one of our guys that went to nationals last year for the summer, got hired right away by one of those companies because he has huge skills.
So Unity is quite easy to link text into a box for displaying. This is how simple it is to get a stored variable to say how many shots it takes, to basically binding it. I could have done a simpler way, but since I didn't have that object inside of the widget, I actually have the variable stored inside of the character, so that for each character there would be its own score counter or shot counter. And so this is grabbing that character, the first character, because I only made it one player. Then it's casting to first person character. It's already the first person character, so. And this is grabbing the targets, the shot count from stored variable, and then turning it into text to where it can be returned to the node. And that node, since I've already ran it, I have it preset to 0. And if I go down here to num shots, right down here is bind. And since I already created the binding, it should pop up below. No, I don't want to create a new binding. Do I have to write one stuff? Okay, but that's as hard as it is. You just have to create new binding, and then it will take you to the widgets. Then you have to do a few extra steps to do what might have been a little easier if I had it stored straight in the widget. I just have to call that variable. But as is, since it's stored in another person, I had to make a reference to that subclass before I could grab that variable. So that is a fun way of linking variables from one widget to another.
Take a look at that. Yeah, up there.
I want to try it out. Okay, is it running? Let me stop this so that I can go faster.
Uh-huh.
So that I can get started with this process.
Oh, that's
So, since this one is this one's dead, so you can't use four controllers. This one would be fire. The right one would be young reset.
Yeah.
I think those batteries are dead. Don't have enough draw for these.
With the on trigger,
Now you should be seeing the Steam VR and since it unlocked the
I
visual
noticed,
screen,
don't you have to have an extra component along with the collision for a trigger?
that's how I see it.
Or how would, I'm wondering how that's different.
Well,
I'm trying to find a
it should be
difference
in my
between
book.
trigger and collision. I mean, I know collision is where it's directly on.
I think so.
I know.
I think how it works is you're not you're always going for
Yeah.
inside that.
Every now and then, like every half second, it pops into your Yeah, it's one it's auto connecting it to the control, which I was trying to cast as a game, cast a game.
Oh, okay. So it would be like if it didn't be on a collision inside, but then on trigger inside.
So your on collision is and that's what it's actually collision.
Yeah.
It's saying what's triggered.
I have to.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Your projectile attack.
That's such a good way to think of it, actually. I just never thought of it. And yeah, the only issue I came across with that prototype is my enemy ship, which gets destroyed. That's the only issue that's happening with regard to that. The collision for the collision for my for the enemies was working perfectly.
It took me forever to just figure that out.
Yeah, I'm thinking what I'm gonna try. I'm definitely gonna try to see if maybe what I'm needing to do is have a collision collision with the enemy ship as well, like the hero ship as well. And that's probably what. Because when I had the trigger, I noticed when I put the trigger for the hero ship, it didn't do what it needed to. Yeah. Because every time I put a collision, when I put the collision,
This is the first time I've logged on
on
to
the other
this.
ships, it worked fine. So, yeah,
And it's just like I guess.
I guess it has to be like that.
Well, it's the first time I have it. It's the first time I've been.
No one was gonna
But yeah, so I hope you guys like it. I finally figured out something, found something interesting. At least with what wasn't working before. I think I found what I was trying to understand trigger and collision a little better. And I noticed when I put the trigger event on trigger for my hero ships, it wasn't working.
This is seeing exactly what you're seeing. Yeah, yeah, this is the one. So we are that's the maybe they both need. And whenever I have this selected,
He's gonna take over the Zoom session here.
yeah, it's running at 1.2 now, and now it's trying to do it fast, so it doesn't know which code I'm looking at.
He was thinking it would be nice to compare the different big game engines, and I agree. So let's take a look here. We've been using Unity, in our course, and the reason that we use Unity is two or threefold. Basically, because it was free for schools. It uses C#, is its scripting language, which goes along well for us with our curriculum because we have C# classes. So that's a good reason for us to use Unity. You can create things, pretty impressive things, pretty quickly with it. So it's good for students. And they actually have this new thing that's a Unity, like, building blocks type thing. It's an asset that you can download that lets you really even have more generation capabilities where you
Make
can
buildings and stuff. Yeah, you got stairs. Like you can take the stairs and make it spiral. You
So-
can change it different directions. Yeah.
it gives you a lot of building blocks. Take a look at that. And then with Unreal, David's shown us quite a bit about Unreal. You see with Unreal, you have those blueprints where it's more visual with your coding. You're using components and connecting them through those blueprints.
I mean, you can also bind it to script if you're good with
Yeah.
script.
You can.
It's
Your
made-
scripting languages are C++, and what's the other choice?
You can download plugins to get just about any other language.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So it is not restricted to
Not
one
just C++.
language. You can get a C# for it, but it's preset is C++.
A lot of people like it. Scroll down and tell us what you found there, Jay. Now, the third one is the Cry engine that they're comparing.
Yes,
to.
Cry
So
engine is
That's
another
always
fun
an
one.
important one for us to be considering and looking at.
So, summarizing this article, they talk about they show this from like an outside perspective. They don't give you their point of view as far as what their favorite is. They want to bring the importance of one of the beginning stages of a game development team. Isn't like you won't always design in Unity or Unreal or Cry. It depends on what your game wants to do. So, summarizing this article, Unity is best for cross-platform. It supports 25 different platforms where Unreal only supports 10 and CryEngine only supports 5. The biggest difference is Unreal is great for mobile, 2D, and 3D gaming, where maybe the graphics isn't your main concept where you care about gameplay instead of graphics. Unity or Unreal and CryEngine are both photorealistic game engines. So if you want like an RPG where it's single player and you want your people to get captured in the moment, you want it to feel realistic, Unreal and CryEngine is your guy. But Unreal and CryEngine are not very good at developing for old consoles either, old platforms, where Unity you can develop for like a 360 if you wanted to. Because every time you update your Unreal Engine, it loses its backwards support. Also, CryEngine is supposed to be pretty on level with Unreal, except it is very unuser friendly. It's not recommended for beginners.
I've got one comment about it. You can go all the way back to the original Unreal Engine and still be able to create for Xbox 360 and Wii and most of the older consoles. You can have multiple editors downloaded, but yes, you can. Once you upgrade a package from like 17 to version 19, you can't downgrade. You can always upgrade, and you can have multiple different launchers depending on the task you need.
Unreal over the years has lost a lot of their developers because they don't keep that backwards compatibility. We have to update your applications to the newest release. And that causes a lot of trouble. But it also makes it where you can have a better product, if you don't worry about this. So
You can keep the older versions just fine. You can grab their
right, but you think
version
about
of
your
their
network
which
support,
ones.
if your IT network how many versions of it are you gonna be running for your development? You start getting into
There's a lot of resources.
a lot of resources. So you do start getting into some resource issues, but it's still, you know, a very, very, because, like I said, because they're gonna make these huge advancements, so they've decided this update is worth that. So there's definitely reasons behind it. And then why would you use the Cry engine ever?
They're new to the market. I think in general they're new, and they actually have an edge. They still have an edge over Unity when it comes to graphics and VR. I think that's their main source of work is VR stuff. They excel ahead of both of these other engines in the VR section because of their built-in tools.
Because they're limited in platforms, they're able to be really specialized
I think so.
and really good at those platforms.
Yeah.
Always those trade-offs we have to be concerned about. Because they can get really specialized on those platforms that they do.
And you're going to see a bigger thing. Like, so here's, like, if you want to talk about current things, I don't know, I'm assuming that most people have heard about Google's new gaming system that they're developing. Scotty. Well, Unreal Engine, as far as I'm aware, is the only one that actually can develop games for that current platform. You know what I mean? So that they take priority over like making sure they get the new stuff in. They also have a bigger, like, I don't want to say team, but like a bigger base of their community's bigger. So like if you ever need help or you need like an asset or something, there's just a million people out there that specialize in making, I don't know, weapons. And then like I showed these guys, that Brackley's on YouTube, he has his own website where you can go and you can get free assets. And then you've got like this pay for what you want thing. So like if you want a packet of castles, he has a free version. And then for like $2 more, you get like an additional thing, and it just kind of stacks depending on what kind of stuff you want. And he even has. I recommend him for all his videos because for one, he's entertaining. What's his name? Brackley's. And yeah, so his website's awesome. His videos are awesome. He's entertaining. His videos are super fast paced. So I just keep
about 10 minutes
space.
long each. You'll hear how it goes over 10 minutes on each of them. I've watched several of them.
Yeah, but he can make a full game in 10 minutes. So like, you have to hit the pause button a lot. But,
We're already subscribed, so we're good.
Yeah. Yeah, so he's really cool. He also has Blender tutorials and show you how to make your own textures and stuff, which is in itself is a complex thing for a beginner.
He does a lot with Unity. All the like things you might not think of, the lighting, stuff like that, and just basics to put everything together to make a good game.
I honestly prefer watching his videos over watching the Unity Unity school, because those things are super dry and.
Well, those things are like more geared towards professional developers. I feel like in the field, like I watched one that was like 3 hours long, and it was just like for a section, and I was like, this is good. But it's already like got all this stuff put together.
What was the name of the YouTuber again?
It's Bradley.
I'll show you. I'll give you
Yeah, I
a
don't know.
visual.
It's Bradley, but I think it's-
Yeah, I'm trying to.
Rack like a brick on an egg.
Here you go, Brackley's. And this is his YouTube channel.
Is it now?
And then you can go. Well, yeah. Oh, that's it. It is his website. So if you go to his YouTube channel, this is him.
Yeah, it's Bradley's.
So this is him, and then like you can see, like you look at his playlist real quick. So he's got, just these playlists for all this stuff, and
Brackley.
yeah.
Bradley, yeah. See, this is what I did. Trace for my tower defense.
Yeah,
Yeah, so he's really good. And I was hoping to see his link for. I might have to actually click on a video for that.
Yeah, if you click on the video, they'll have it in the more.
Yeah, so I see.
Show more or whatever.
This might get me where I want to go.
one that I always have to point out, because I'm from the southwest corner of the state, where there are casinos everywhere, and Unity is the
As long as I
number
can
one.
have a good
As long as
development
I,
tool for
as long as I
casino
can pause
gaming.
it.
So that's a really, really big market, and that's a really big development area, and that's a really easy development.
Yeah.
So definitely, no collisions, just pretty sparkles.
Whatever happens.
You get this.
What's
Right,
that?
there you go.
Yeah,
Well,
so
they
you
got
get
it.
your
Those are
developer,
pretty
yeah,
determined,
where
yeah.
where are you getting this values you're getting from the network?
That don't necessarily come from you, those are predetermined, that's
Yeah,
the chips
Yeah, but you
that
have
they
to
can
read
change
it.
out.
So
So-
I'm curious, like, where
Yeah.
where did values come from? I hit that play button that determines if I win or lose, and it gives me the pity win. How did it calculate to get me that?
Yeah, well, there's a percentage,
Exactly. I only do
Setting all those values.
yeah, there's a percentage
And
that
we
you
need
can
to
set.
increase our payout overall.
from the active value to so.
But I think it would be
Well,
very interesting.
It's pretty, each time you hit spin, it's a random, completely random each time. You don't have it doesn't take the previous spins as well. It only, when you hit spin, it's all
It's
that.
got it. It's got every other machine on the floor, their total payout rates, what I was paid out, how much they have left to pay out.
Yeah.
Yes, you get $1,000.
Say you create.
And this is really cool because like you can come here and like I don't know maybe you want to do a 3D game. You can go buy it. You don't have to buy them. You guys have free stuff. A lot of this stuff is super cheap. So you can look at this Western pack. And then so for $0,
Okay, I'm
What's
probably
on
gonna
good?
win this machine based on what it's.
he had one that was good slide.
No.
You really have to sign papers.
Because, so all I said, all predetermined, like the pennies is gonna be like an 80% chance to win your money back.
Yeah,
The
so you
higher,
see
the
here,
more it costs.
Kyle, he's like, oh,
play, the higher the
for free you can get
I
this
think the
hammer
higher
and
the percentage,
sword.
somewhere like
And then for
96,
$2 you get the hammer,
97%.
sword, the
Um,
axe on the
pay
side.
you
For
know,
$5
how
you
much
get all
get
these
back,
plus
what
this.
you pay.
And then I think the
But,
10 and the
and
20
like I
one
said,
is just
shading
like,
on the
oh,
low end.
you're
That's
just
right.
more like, so
I think it
So
would
that's
be
really
very
cool. And these are all
interesting, like,
4K textures.
things that it is around.
And I don't want to
It's
drugs.
when they
You make a lot.
Yeah.
Honestly, at some
Well, and I mean, I
point,
think
so
there's
I
jobs
know my
out there.
computer is reasonably new.
Yeah.
At some point, I'm definitely considering upgrading.
Some
because-
aspects of what we do where it
It's,
would actually be hard to find somebody who would pay you.
Because
Yeah.
especially with doing this kind of thing, these kind of things, I wanna have a computer that can handle it better.
Kind of easy maintenance.
And
They think that we're going to fix things for graphics.
Yeah.
Okay, well, awesome stuff here. You guys go head out to the picnic. I'll see you next week. Be thinking about what you're gonna do for your final project. Be more than thinking if you can. Make sure you get this one turned in, because I know I look forward to a huge amount of training this weekend.
Did we turn it into games? No, I get when we get home.
Should just be.
Jaded, have you turned it in?
No.
Okay.
Are you gonna turn it in?
definitely.
Yeah, I'll do it when I get home.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Just over the
Check
summer.
tonight,
stuff,
sometimes.
I'm trying to.
In case I forget, but I
I'm
don't.
gonna ask someone to improve upon everything.
Oh, I'll get rid of it.
I really, I get, I just like doing it.
Yeah, no, it's awesome.
I mean, don't get me wrong, still being a gamer and stuff, I still play on my own time, but it's fun
Yeah,
to
we got
do
bigger
this.
class.
I really like the fact that you get to see how it works.
I know, it's hot, guys, get you some free stuff. It's just a lot. Every year. You never know.
So like, that was sort of thing that was on into like, I would have loved.
The script just says,
Looks very too big. And so values get too big.
no, we have a projectile
So yeah, I
line.
tried doing,
Look at that projectile line. That's what's determining
the mass of that
the
line.
angle that it shoots off to. So we're taking that projectile line and starting at our launch point. And then I think we were setting to the next point, like depending on the positioning of that thing. The Y thing.
So wasn't you talking about the 2D one where you just pull it back in?
Yeah, So the script is projectile line. I think that's the one that would have what you're thinking about, because we started out with the launch position, and we're looking at the difference between the point of where they're at and the slingshot's original launch position, and then setting up a line of points as to where how we want that projectile to proceed, and then we're working it over there.
Mine, I wasn't doing a difference in where the projectile was because I was just the projectile sat there, and then based on the slider from where it's sitting, it got its.
So I think you should be able to check out that line one if you're going to mess with it anymore, because I think that's what it is. I think you have it really close. It would just be that instead of starting with that position, you would start with your slider impact on that launch position as your beginning point to see where it would shoot off.
I gotta say, there was one thing that I definitely, at some point, I'm definitely considering. They actually have an audio engine called Fruity Loops, and this is the kind. I didn't make this, but this is the kind of stuff I'd like to be messing around with it. This takes a little bit, but this guy made a remake of a Mega Man song from the Super Nintendo, and he put it in the arcade format, arcade sound, for the Capcom Play System #1. That's what they call it. Okay. Oh, okay. It's almost there. Almost there. Yeah. Sometimes it's so. It has a very, I always thought this sounds a lot like what the Sega Genesis sounded like. It has a very early 90s, late 80s twang to it.
My screen is
Oh, it's 2 bars, that's one. Let me see if I can get to one. But yeah, essentially, this guy, what he tried to do is he replicates the retro sound. And one of the things I wish I could do, at least I don't know if I can do this with Audacity itself, but at some point it'd be cool if I could add retro sound. There you go. Sounds very much like early 80s, late. And these are actually all the different wave channels. It's kind of hard to see.
Yeah. Oh, that's neat. I'm glad you're playing with it. That sounds very interesting. So have you done anything much with Audacity, or you just?
I'm going to be using it soon, and I was also wanting to, over the summer especially, I'll be messing around with it because I'm wanting to add a lot of things.
Nice.
But yeah.
I went to an estate sale yesterday, which I shouldn't have. I didn't need to go, but on the listing it showed a picture of the Beatles album. And so I thought, sure, I'll go over there and see if it's a first edition, that's supposed to be worth so much money. And of course, you know how many Beatles albums you got. This really dumb, weird old jazz blues album that I just had to buy for $1. And I told my husband, we'll probably never listen to it. But he was excited about it too. No, we needed this. Looks very interesting.
One of the things I was even thinking about with one of my games, I was thinking about whenever I mess with the previous ones, when I go back to the previous ones and expand upon it, I was thinking one of the things I could make easily as a car sound would be like my trombone going.
That would be neat.
Yeah.
You have to be so detail oriented to keep track of all that stuff.
Yeah.
No, I love your game. It was awesome. You should definitely add some.
I do, and I will.
It's great.
I do, and I will.
Go find you some hot dogs.
All right.
I just gotta stop taking command. You tell it it's controlling. Just so you see the speed.
Someone kept calling.
What?
Oh, someone kept calling when you guys were presenting. I hate that. It was an OTC number.